Last week I competed, earning silver and gold in both of my divisions after a 6-year competition break because I hurt my spine and needed a cervical spinal fusion. Today we're covering my tried and true tips that have got me to the podium every time I've competed. And no, it's not your everyday advice where they'll tell you just need to compete more. These are practical, tangible tips that you can start doing today. But that's enough gum bumping, let's jump in. Tip number 1 covers handling our nerves. Now, most people will tell you just need to compete more. And while this is true, what about the beginners? Or what about the guys and girls who do compete more and still never are able to get over their nerves? I've got the trick for you. Ashwagandha. First off, let's start with what it is and what it does. It's an evergreen plant that grows in Asia and Africa, and it's commonly used to reduce stress. Now, this one has a slew of benefits, but the main ones that are going to help you when you're competing are that it calms the brain and it lowers blood pressure. Normally when I compete, I get nervous the day of, but because it's been 6 years for me, I was getting nervous a full week out. The nerves I was feeling before the tournament up until the day of, I just handled mentally. I sat with those feelings and I dealt with those feelings. But on the day of the tournament, especially leading up into the moments before I weighed in, I was extra nervous and I wanted to take an edge off so I could be on my A game. All I did was take 150 milligrams of ashwagandha extract, and guess what? It calmed me right down. I weighed in for the 200-pound weight class, made weight, and I was good to go. I went and sat down, ate my food, got ready, stretched out, warmed up. As I got closer to my matches, about an hour out, I started getting really nervous again. So again, I took 150 milligrams of ashwagandha. I wanted to be careful about taking too much of it because I didn't want to dull out my fight or flight response. I didn't want to become so docile that I wasn't aggressive in my fights. So I took the 150 milligrams and called it a day. I can tell you this, I made my way out to the mats thinking very clearly and sharply. I wasn't overly excited and I wasn't making bad decisions when I was grappling with my opponents. All of which can go completely wrong if you're overly nervous. Now, at the end of the day, will competing more help this? Yes, of course. But this tip goes out to you beginners. This tip goes out to you people who've tried to compete more and you still can't really conquer those nerves. Try some ashwagandha. I think you'll really like it. Tip number 2, I didn't listen to any music this time. As someone who grew up with a wrestling background, when I'd go to wrestling tournaments, I'd put my headphones on and listen to music that amped me up. I'd get really psyched out and I'd be ready for war. And while that might have worked in high school wrestling when you're doing 2-3-minute rounds, but as an adult doing jiu-jitsu for 5 to 10 minutes per match, it's not really feasible to stomp on your gas pedal the whole time. What I want to do is acclimate to my surroundings. I want to get used to the announcer calling people's names over the loudspeaker. I want to get used to hearing the crowd screaming and yelling, and I want to get used to the ref controlling the match. Now, this is just me personally, but if I'm listening to music and I'm getting amped up, or if I'm listening to music, calm music even, I'm inside this little bubble that is the mental space of will, me, right? And when my coach comes over and slaps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you're up," I take my headphones off and all of a sudden I'm flooded with new sounds that I'm not used to yet, new sounds and feelings. I'm hearing the crowd screaming, I'm hearing the refs controlling the match, I'm hearing names being called, and now I'm getting used to this as I'm walking up to my match. That's not the time that I want to acclimate to my environment. I want to be acclimated to my environment well before I get up to that match to shake hands with my opponent. By the time I'm standing there with the ref and my opponent, the only thing that should be new to me is that opponent standing in front of me. Think about it like this. By managing your reactions to your environment is allowing you to think more clearly when decision making counts the most. I've really gotten away from listening to music, any kind of music really. I really enjoy just getting used to the sights and sounds around me, and by the time I'm ready to compete, I've already ingested all this. None of this is new. All right, the only thing new is my opponent, and I think that'll help you a lot too. Tip number 3, proper warm up. Now, there's a couple different ways I go about doing this. If I'm competing in the gi, I warm up in my gi. I don't wear a hoodie underneath. I don't wear a hoodie over. What I compete in is what I warm up in. And this might be a little controversial. This is me personally, okay, guys? If some of you guys disagree, that's fine. And I want to hear how you guys like to warm up when you compete. But for me, I don't want there to be any distractions, any changes in how I feel moments before I compete. I go out there and I warm up in my gi. I get nice and warmed up and sweaty in that. And then when I go out, I shake hands and I'm good to go. I don't want to get warmed up in a hoodie or some kind of a warm-up outfit and then have to either change my clothes or take a hoodie off and then I feel cold moments before going out on the mats. I don't want there to be any changes that distract my mind from the mission ahead. It's the same idea with no-gi. What I'm warming up in is what I'm fighting in. I don't want there to be any kind of a mental distraction, any kind of extra feelings that my brain has to process moments before I'm going on the mats with my opponent. My personal opinion, if you're properly getting warmed up, you're stretched out, you're warmed up, and you're good to go, you don't need to throw a hoodie on, you don't need to throw sweatpants on. As always, I definitely want to hear how you guys like to warm up and how you guys like to get ready in the comments, so make sure to share those. The less that I have to mentally process moments before I compete, the better. I think if you give this one a try, you'll find it pretty useful. And again, guys, this is just my way. It doesn't mean that it's the only way or it's the right way. This is the stuff that works for me, okay? I really want to hammer that home because I want to come from a place of humility. I want to be humble about this. I'm not saying that my way is the only way. I'm not saying that I'm the best of the best, because I'm not. I'm a guy that loves jiu-jitsu, and I'm a guy who's figured enough out to help myself do well when I compete. This next tip is a fun one. I've stolen this one from seeing Kyle Terra do this. I like to pay attention to what the best guys in the world do and then try to emulate that. If you're a fan of Kyle Terra, you probably know what I'm talking about, and that is eating Skittles before you compete. Now, if you've competed before, you've probably experienced some version of dry mouth. I'll put the scientific name for it here because I'm definitely not trying to pronounce that. This happens because of a heightened secretion of neurotransmitters that occurs because of a nervous or competitive situation. And if you've ever competed with dry mouth or cotton mouth, you know that not only is it annoying, it also makes breathing a little bit more difficult. And on top of that, if you experience an adrenaline dump, which you most likely will, you're gonna burn through your energy really, really fast. And for those of you who've competed, you know what I'm talking about. You burn your grips out after one match. I remember my first jiu-jitsu tournament, after my first match, my coach handed me my water bottle, and the second it hit my fingers, it dropped out of my hand because I couldn't close my fingers tightly enough around it to hold the bottle. So in that arena alone, we've got a couple things working against us. But if we eat Skittles before our match, it's the most silly thing in the world. It's the most easy solution though. It fixes both of these things. Because eating Skittles will help keep your mouth a little bit more wet. It'll also help keep your trachea a little bit more moist, which also helps you in breathing much easier. On top of that, it's concentrated energy. Now, you could get the same result, I suppose, if you were to eat fruit, but that takes up more space in your stomach. There's a lot more liquid and fiber involved, and the last thing you want is food sloshing around in your stomach as you're competing. The great thing about Skittles or high sugar candy is that it disintegrates basically into nothing, taking up no room in your stomach, while also putting that quick energy right back into your bloodstream. This was my first time competing using this technique, and I gotta say that not only did my lungs not burn out, neither did my muscles. I felt like I could have rolled probably 5 more matches after this. I felt really, really good. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how much of these do I really need to eat? What I did was about half an hour before my match started, I was eating them one by one. Even when I was warming up, I was still feeding myself that slow drip of that high sugar goodness. And then moments before my match happened, I was eating smaller handfuls, okay? And by the time I got out there, I felt supercharged. You gotta remember that I don't have processed sugar in my diet. The sugar that I eat comes from fruit. So in doing this technique, I felt like a regular car that just had 2 turbos installed on it. And yes, out of all the rolls I had, the energy sustained itself throughout each and every match. It was pretty cool. If you pay attention, you'll see that other professional athletes use this same trick. So I don't know, if you've never tried it, give it a shot. I'm not saying it's a game changer, but it really helped me, and I will definitely be doing that moving forward in all my competitions. This next tip, staying calm before your match, is a big one. If you compare the white belts to the black belts moments before the match, remember, moments before the match, the white belts are still warming up like crazy, slapping themselves on the head, going nuts in the sidelines, whereas you look over at the black belts and they're just standing there, cool, calm, and collected, right? Again, I always like to emulate the guys at the highest level, and they're always calm, right? Keep yourself calm. Get your body ready for war, but keep your mind calm. You can't make and process decisions the way you should if you're all amped up and wild. You want a cool mind and a ready body. And in fact, what I like to do moments before I step out on the mat, I like to pretend that I've done this 1,000 times before. Even if I'm nowhere near that number, I just pretend, and I stand there and I'm extra calm. And it helps. It will help you go out there, think more clearly, make better decisions when those decisions count. And I just want to take a second to give a quick shout out to my sponsor, X Martial. X Martial is a growing combat sport brand that's dedicated to supporting the jiu-jitsu community by sponsoring kids, athletes, and creators like myself. They produce high quality gis, no-gis, spats, and even streetwear, everything you need to take your training to the next level. So whether you're cracking, slapping, tapping, or napping, you can look as good as me and probably even better by picking yourself up some high quality gear from X Martial. If you'd like to support me and my channel, you can click on the link in the description, use my discount code IRONWILL to save yourself some money, and go ahead and grab some high quality, fun jiu-jitsu gear. All right, that's enough gum bumping. Let's get back to the video. And last but not least, this one's more of a mental trick, but you can take pressure off yourself by just pretending that this tournament you're competing in is just a really fancy open mat. In the approximate 8 years of my jiu-jitsu training, I've really enjoyed going to other open mats at other schools because I get to roll with guys who I don't know their game. I'm not familiar with what they're going to do. One of the things that kind of becomes redundant when rolling with the same guys is that you learn their game and it can almost turn into a dance. By visiting other schools, I'm getting new guys who I don't know their game, and there's that element of the unknown there. Well, that's the same thing that's happening when you go to a tournament. You're just mentally applying more pressure to yourself because you feel there's more at stake. But if you can convince yourself that you're at another school's fancy open mat to which you've never visited before, it's a great way to help calm your nerves. So when you're standing there on the side waiting for your match to start, even though an open mat and a tournament are two totally different things, if you can convince yourself that there's a lot of similarities between the two and you've already done this so many times, I find that it calms me down, and I think that it can calm you down too. And those are my practical and tangible tips for performing better when you compete. Hopefully these tips, if they even help one person, I'm gonna feel good about that. And with that, for you guys that do compete, comment down below what you do to prepare for your competitions. I'd love to hear your theories, your setups, what you guys do, right? I'm one perspective, and I'm trying to build a community here where we all can learn together, and I want that value in the comments section because other people are gonna read that. White belts are going to come here and read some black belts comment, and you could be changing the course of someone's entire journey. So drop your knowledge down below. I always appreciate you guys. And with that, I think we're good to close out. Sometimes backwards, always forwards. That's the journey. I'll see you in the next one.